Hi there, and welcome back to Haunting Veils, the channel where shadows linger, secrets unravel, and the most chilling mysteries come alive. Tonight, we follow none other than the great Hercule Poirot, the brilliant Belgian detective with his impeccable order, sharp wit, and those famous little gray cells. Our tale is titled The Emerald Widow, a case steeped in elegance, deception, and betrayal. When a wealthy widow dies under mysterious circumstances, suspicion falls upon those closest to her. Hidden motives, poison whispers, and a priceless jewel bring Poirot face to face with a crime that only he can untangle. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, like, and share so you never miss another haunting tale of mystery and intrigue. Now let's dive in. Chapter 1. The Lady in Emerald. London, in the spring of 1932, was alive with the hum of motor cars, the bustle of fashionable crowds along Regent Street, and the endless chatter of society columns that fed upon scandal and spectacle as ravenously as birds upon breadcrumbs. At the center of this latest swirl of gossip stood one woman, whose name fell from lips in drawing rooms as easily as pearls slipped from a broken necklace. Lady Eleanor Ashcombe, christened in whispers and headlines alike as the Emerald Widow. It was not merely her beauty that provoked fascination, though she was, by every standard of the age, arrestingly elegant. Nor was it merely her wealth, though she had inherited a fortune most would never dream of touching. It was the circumstances, sudden, dramatic, and curiously shadowed, of her rise to prominence. Her late husband, Lord Percival Ashcombe, had been an eccentric man of 60 years, twice her age, with a passion for rare jewels. He had scoured India, Egypt, and South America in pursuit of emeralds, amassing a collection that jewel merchants of Bond Street declared unrivaled in Europe. His sudden death, reported as heart failure, had placed this extraordinary trove into Eleanor's possession. She wore the most exquisite piece, a necklace of perfectly matched stones, set in platinum and designed to catch the light with every breath she took. At nearly every gathering, as though the emeralds were not ornaments, but guardians of her newfound station. And so the city named her the Emerald Widow. It was on one of those gleaming May evenings that Hercule Poirot, retired yet never idle, found himself accompanying his loyal friend Captain Hastings to Lady Eleanor's Grosvenor Square townhouse. Hastings had insisted upon it, declaring that a man must not spend all his hours brooding upon his mustaches, nor polishing his shoes to a mirror's gleam. Poirot, though protesting in words, had secretly relished the prospect of observing the famed widow for himself. The house itself was a study in grandeur. Tall windows framed by velvet curtains looked out upon the square, while chandeliers cast soft pools of golden light upon polished oak floors. Servants in immaculate livery moved gracefully among the throng, offering champagne flutes and delicate morsels to the assembled guests. There were military men, retired colonels boasting of campaigns long past, ladies draped in silks and sequins, their laughter pitched a little too high, young men of good family but questionable occupation, and the occasional foreign dignitary, lending a hint of intrigue to the company. Poirot entered with the quiet dignity that always seemed to draw attention to him, no matter how modest his intention. His patent leather shoes gleamed. His gray suit was pressed to perfection, his bow tie precisely centered. He tapped his silver-headed cane gently upon the marble floor and allowed his mustaches their full glory. "Mon Dieu! Hastings," he whispered, casting a quick glance around the crowded room. "Behold the spectacle. So much vanity, so much display. And yet, beneath it all, there is the fear that one will not be admired enough." Hastings chuckled, tugging at his tie. "Really, Poirot, must you always look for the darker undercurrent? They're here for an evening's pleasure. So should we be." Poirot's lips twitched into a smile. "Pleasure for them, mon ami. Observation for Poirot. It is the natural order." And then she appeared. Lady Eleanor descended the wide staircase with the grace of a queen. Her gown of emerald satin shimmered with each step, and upon her throat glistened the necklace, 20 perfect emeralds, oval cut, radiating a green so intense that the very air seemed tinted by it. Guests drew in their breath as she passed, some in admiration, others in envy. But Poirot, always the watchful hawk, noticed something else. Her eyes, though bright, were rimmed with fatigue. Her smile was gracious, but carefully measured, as though each curve of her lips had been rehearsed. Voilà, et murmure, la veuve émeraude. But Hastings looked closer. Do you see? She is adored, yes, but she is also watched, and not only by the society gossips. Indeed, Poirot's eyes had already traced several glances too sharp, too prolonged, to be mere admiration. A dark-haired gentleman near the fireplace stiffened as Lady Eleanor's gaze passed over him. A young woman in a crimson gown whispered furiously behind her fan. A stout banker turned pale when a necklace caught the light. Dash it all, Poirot, she's simply stunning, Hastings whispered, oblivious. That necklace, it must be worth a king's ransom. Poirot's eyes glittered. Oui, mon ami. And for a king's ransom, men have killed before. The evening unfolded with all the trappings of splendor. A string quartet, the popping of champagne corks, the laughter of women spilling across the grand staircase. Lady Eleanor played hostess with poise, moving from group to group, a word of charm here, a delicate laugh there. But Poirot, with his little gray cells ever alert, noted the flicker of tension whenever her hand brushed the necklace, as though she reassured herself constantly of its presence. Then came the scream. It cut through the music like a blade, silencing the chatter, freezing every hand in mid-gesture. The guests turned, startled, as a maid appeared at the top of the staircase, her face ghostly pale, her hand pressed to her mouth. At her feet lay the crumpled body of a man. His limbs sprawled at unnatural angles, his neck twisted in a grotesque manner. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Lady Eleanor swayed as though she might collapse, clutching at the banister with trembling hands. Poirot and Hastings pushed forward, their passage eased by the stunned retreat of the other guests. The dead man was Adrian Whitcomb, Lady Eleanor's solicitor, a respectable figure of middle years, known for his discretion and his unfailing loyalty to the Ashcombe estate. His eyes stared sightlessly upward, his lips frozen in the shape of a final, unspoken word. And in his stiffening hand glittered something extraordinary. A single emerald. Poirot bent down, his shadow falling across the corpse. With the gentlest touch of his gloved fingers, he confirmed what his eyes already told him. The stone matched those in the necklace around Lady Eleanor's throat. And indeed, even from a distance, he could see the necklace was incomplete. One emerald was missing. He straightened slowly, his eyes narrowing. Lady Eleanor, stricken with shock, raised trembling hands to her neck. Her breath came in shallow gasps. "Impossible," she whispered. "It cannot be." The clasp was secure. It was all secure. The guests whispered furiously, eyes darting between their hostess and the body. Poirot raised one hand for silence, his calm presence instantly commanding the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said softly, his voice carrying none the less. "We are in the presence of tragedy. But do not give way to confusion. Order, always order, must prevail. This man, he did not die by chance." He glanced once more at the corpse, then at the glittering emerald clutched in death's grip. His mustaches quivered as he spoke the words that would hang over the gathering like a sentence. So, already, the emeralds claim another life. Chapter 2, Shadows in Grosvenor Square. The grand salon of Lady Eleanor Ashcombe's townhouse, once alive with laughter and music, now resembled a stage upon which tragedy had struck its opening chord. The guests had been shepherded into smaller groups, their voices lowered, their eyes darting toward the body still lying at the foot of the staircase, covered now by a hastily fetched velvet drape. The scent of perfume and champagne lingered uneasily with the sharper tang of fear. Poirot, standing beside his steadfast Hastings, surveyed the assembly with his usual air of calm precision. Already his little gray cells stirred. He had seen not only a corpse, but the ripple it sent through the living. Mon cher Hastings, Poirot murmured, lowering his voice. Observe how the tragedy acts as a mirror. Each guest reflects his conscience, guilt, relief, curiosity. The murderer, too, is here. Always, the murderer returns to the scene. Hastings frowned. You don't really think Whitcomb was murdered, do you? The poor fellow might have tripped on the staircase. Poirot wagged a finger. No, no, no. He holds too tightly that which is not his, the emerald. And, mark you, the position of the body is wrong for a simple fall. He has been placed, mon ami. Arranged. Before Hastings could protest further, the heavy tread of Inspector James Burrows of Scotland Yard echoed across the hall. He was a burly man with the air of one long accustomed to crime scenes. Those eye twitched faintly when he spotted Poirot. Blast it! Not you again, Burrows muttered under his breath. If there's a murder in London, you're never far behind, eh? Poirot inclined his head gracefully. It is true, Inspector, Death and we are, how do you say, old acquaintances. But perhaps this time, I may save you some trouble. Burrows harumphed, then turned to Lady Eleanor, who had sunk into a damask chair, pale but still composed, her emerald necklace shimmering ominously against her throat. Lady Ashcombe, Burrows began formally, this Whitcomb fellow, he was your solicitor, I understand? Any reason he should be in possession of one of your emeralds? Her lips trembled faintly. None, Inspector. The necklace was intact when I descended. It is always intact. I checked the clasp myself. Those emeralds, they are my husband's legacy. They never leave my sight. Yet one did, Poirot observed softly, and it found its way into the hand of a dead man. Her eyes met his, haunted. Monsieur Poirot, you must believe me. I know nothing of how it came there. Poirot bowed slightly. I believe, Lady Ashcombe, that you are greatly distressed. That is not the same as believing you are without secrets. She flinched at his words, though quickly composed herself again. Hastings shot him a reproachful glance, but Poirot's gaze had already drifted to the other guests. It was time to take stock of the company. Those who remained were no longer merely guests at a party. They were players in a drama, each with a role to reveal. The suspects of Grosvenor Square. Mr. Charles Ashcombe, nephew of the late Lord Percival, a tall and angular young man with sharp cheekbones and sharper debts. His fortune had vanished at the gaming tables, and whispers in society suggested he had long hoped to inherit from his uncle. He lingered by the fireplace, his fingers drumming impatiently on the mantelpiece. Miss Verity Harcourt, a socialite in a crimson gown, her beauty bold, her gaze calculating. Known for her flirtations and whispered scandals, she had been seen often in Lady Eleanor's company, but always with a flicker of rivalry in her eyes. She whispered now with another guest, her fan concealing her lips but not her agitation. Mr. Basil Montfort, a banker of solid girth and nervous manner, who perspired freely whenever questioned. He had been responsible for managing much of Lord Percival's financial affairs and was rumored to have invested heavily, perhaps recklessly, on behalf of the Ashcombe estate. Madame Celeste Moreau, a French companion to Lady Eleanor, older, elegantly dressed, with silver hair and eyes that seemed always to be calculating. She had been hired to assist Eleanor in navigating society, though Poirot suspected her influence extended further. Colonel Arthur Lytton, a retired military man with a booming voice and medals across his chest, who spoke often of his campaigns abroad. He had once served alongside Lord Percival and had grown curiously close to the widow since the old lord's passing. His manner was protective, perhaps too protective. Each, Poirot noted, reacted differently to Whitcomb's death. Charles Ashcombe with ill-suppressed irritation. Verity Harcourt with a thrill of something not entirely fear. Basil Montfort with desperate unease. Celeste Moreau with an inscrutable calm. And Colonel Lytton with an almost theatrical outrage. Regard them well, Hastings, Poirot murmured. Already they show us their truths. And their lies. Burrows, meanwhile, blustered through formalities, commanding constables to guard the doors, taking statements in his heavy-handed manner. He treated the suspects with brusque efficiency, yet always returned an uneasy glance at Poirot, who who seemed to see far more without lifting a pen. When at last the guests were told they might not leave until further inquiries were made, a tense silence descended upon the salon. Glasses of champagne stood abandoned, violins silenced, the gaiety smothered. All eyes flickered nervously to the emerald necklace still gleaming at Lady Eleanor's throat, as if it were not a jewel, but a curse. Poirot stepped lightly toward the staircase, his gaze upon the banister. He crouched delicately, running a finger along the polished wood, then examined the carpet at the top step. At once his eyes sharpened. "Hastings, mon ami, observe. The dust here, it is disturbed. And see, this fiber? It does not match the carpet. It matches a glove. A glove torn in haste, perhaps." Hastings bent, though with little comprehension. "A glove? Well, people wear gloves all the time, Poirot. But this glove, it belonged to one who was present at this gathering, and it was torn as its owner manipulated the scene." Poirot's eyes gleamed. No, Hastings Whitcomb did not stumble by accident. He was pushed, or at the very least, guided, into death. And the emerald was placed in his hand to speak for him after he could no longer speak himself. From the corner of the room came a low murmur. It was Lady Eleanor, clutching at her emerald necklace as though it burned her skin. "The emeralds," she whispered, her voice shaking. "They always bring misfortune. My husband. Now, Adrian, perhaps I should never have worn them tonight." Poirot straightened, his eyes alight with interest. "Perhaps, Lady Ashcombe, or perhaps someone else wishes you to believe in curses. But Poirot, he believes only in human motives. And in this room, there is motive enough to fill a ballroom." The suspect stirred uneasily under his gaze. Outside, the bells of Grosvenor Square tolled midnight, solemn and heavy, as though marking the first hour of a very long night. Chapter 3: Shadows Among the Heirs. The drawing-room of the Emerald Grange was heavy with velvet curtains and the faint scent of roses that had long since lost their freshness. Candles flickered in brass sconces upon the walls, and the storm outside seemed to press itself against the windows, rattling panes as though eager to intrude upon the proceedings. Hercule Poirot sat with hands steepled beneath his chin, the famous egg-shaped head inclined slightly forward. His eyes, sharp, inquisitive, patient as a cat, moved from face to face. Each guest was a piece upon his chessboard, and he, Hercule Poirot, was about to play the opening move. "My friends," Poirot began, his accent giving every syllable a curious precision, "there has been a most tragic event. Lady Eleanor Harrow has departed this world in circumstances which, I think you will all agree, are both sudden and troubling. Yet, as with every tragedy, there are questions that must be asked, and answers, yes, answers which must be given." A hush settled upon the company. Sir Clive Harrow, Eleanor's late husband's brother, leaned heavily upon his cane, the lines of his face sharpened by years of bitterness. His gaze darted often toward the emerald pendant resting in its velvet case upon the mantelpiece, as if its green light accused him. To his right sat Vivian Armitage, Eleanor's much younger companion, a woman of delicate frame, pale skin, and eyes that gleamed too brightly with suppressed emotion. The solicitor, Mr. Pemberton, shuffled nervously through his papers, spectacles sliding down his nose. He seemed less concerned with Eleanor's death than with the immediate matter of wills, signatures, and legacies. And then there was Charles Denham, the late lady's nephew, a man of careless charm, who lounged in his chair as if murder and inheritance alike were mere diversions to be endured before supper. Poirot rose and paced the carpet with measured steps. "You see, Miss Amos, each one of you has been drawn here not only by grief but by necessity. Lady Eleanor was, after all, a woman of fortune, and fortune, it has a curious way of magnifying both friendship and enmity." He paused, the corner of his mouth twitching upward. "It is said, is it not, that one knows the true nature of a family when the inheritance is read aloud?" At this, Mr. Pemberton cleared his throat. "Indeed, Monsieur Poirot, Lady Eleanor's last will and testament is here," sealed, and duly witnessed. She made certain amendments only weeks before her passing. His words were drowned momentarily by a clap of thunder that shook the panes. When silence returned, all eyes were fixed upon the envelope he held. "Amendments?" murmured Vivian Armitage, her voice trembling. "But why? She spoke of no such thing to me." Sir Clive struck his cane upon the floor with a thud. "Because she knew her duty, Miss Armitage. This estate, this house, it belongs to the Harrow family. It was never meant for hangers-on and pretty companions." Vivian's cheeks flushed scarlet, and she half rose from her seat. "How dare you? Lady Eleanor treated me as her own daughter. I was with her when none of you were." She stopped short. Words caught in her throat. Poirot's eyes twinkled, but he made no effort to intervene. He merely observed. Charles Denham chuckled, breaking the silence with deliberate irreverence. "Well, this is charming. A widow dies, and suddenly the vultures descend. Tell me, Uncle Clive, will you snatch the emerald pendant too, if it isn't left to you in black ink?" "Silence, Charles," Sir Clive barked. "You would do well to mind your tongue." Poirot, having absorbed the volley of accusations and defenses, raised a delicate hand. "Monsieur, Mesdames, it is not yet the time to quarrel. Lady Eleanor's death must first be understood, and until then, every quarrel, every whisper, may be the thread which leads us to the truth." At his signal, the butler entered, silent as a shadow, bearing the envelope upon a silver tray. Mr. Pemberton took it, slit it with his penknife, and withdrew the will. His voice wavered as he read. The estate, once believed destined for the Harrow line, was instead bequeathed largely to Vivian Armitage, with modest allowances for Sir Clive and Charles Denham. The emerald pendant, heirloom of the Harrow family, was willed to the British Museum on the condition it be displayed under Eleanor's name. The effect was electric. Sir Clive lurched forward, face crimson. "Stolen. She has stolen from us all. This girl and her honeyed words, driven Eleanor to betray her family's name." Vivian gasped, tears brimming, but she spoke with defiance. "No, she chose freely. You despised her for remarrying after your brother's death. You would have left her to rot in loneliness, but Again she faltered, eyes dropping to her lap. Charles Denham's smile had hardened into something sharper. "Curious, is it not, that Lady Eleanor revises her will so recently, and then, lo and behold, she falls victim to a sudden death. I wonder, was it truly natural?" His words hung in the air, heavy with insinuation. Poirot interjected softly, yet with the authority of a judge delivering sentence. "That, Monsieur Denham, is precisely the question. Lady Eleanor was in possession of robust health. No malady was known to afflict her. And yet she dies. If it was not an accident, then we must consider what in French we call the mobile, the motive." He allowed the silence to stretch, watching the shifting glances, the twitch of a hand, the swallow of a throat. His little gray cells were working rapidly, though he betrayed none of his conclusions. Lady Eleanor was not without enemies, however genteel their faces may appear, Poirot continued. "And until I discover the truth, I must ask that none of you leave this house. The storm provides nature's lock upon the gates. Let's consider it providence." The company shifted uneasily. In that moment, the grandeur of the Grange seemed to turn oppressive, its chandeliers casting more shadow than light, its corridors stretching into secrets long concealed. Poirot resumed his seat, fingertips pressed together. His eyes gleamed. "Yes, there are shadows among the heirs. Yes, Amos. And in these shadows, there lies both the truth and the hand of the murderer." The chapter closes with the storm outside raging louder, as though echoing the turmoil within. Chapter 4. The Gathering of Clues. The storm had abated by morning, leaving the Emerald Grange wrapped in a peculiar hush. The lawns outside lay sodden, the gravel drive marked by rivulets of rain, and the great oaks that lined the avenue shivered under a low mist. Within, however, the household stirred uneasily. No one dared whisper of leaving, for Poirot's quiet command carried a weight that no one challenged. The Belgian detective sat at the breakfast table, immaculate as ever, his mustaches waxed to perfect symmetry despite the tempest of the night. He peeled his egg with meticulous care, his small hands moving with precision, and yet his eyes missed nothing. Each person's mood, each glance, each sigh, all were noted and stored away in those little gray cells. When at last the plates were cleared, Poirot dabbed his lips with a napkin, rose, and addressed the company. Messieurs, mesdames, a crime is like a tapestry. At first, one sees only confusion, colors, threads, knots. But when one examines closely, the pattern begins to emerge. Permit me, then, to look more closely at the threads of this house. He began with the chamber of Lady Eleanor herself. The room was a sanctuary of pale green silk, gilt mirrors, and crystal perfume bottles. Upon the escritoire lay correspondence tied with ribbon, letters written in a bold feminine hand. Poirot bent over them, nodding thoughtfully. He plucked one at random. It was addressed to Vivian Armitage. The words spoke of gratitude, affection, even trust. "You are my confidant," Eleanor had written, "and in you I place my faith when the world seems harsh." It is a bond most intimate. Yet, such intimacy may breed both devotion and danger. On the bedside table, he found a glass still half filled with water, a faint residue clinging to its rim. Poirot lifted it delicately with a handkerchief and carried it to the window. The residue caught the light, a crystalline dust, unusual in color. "Mon Dieu," he whispered. "Perhaps here we have the whisper of poison." Downstairs, Poirot requested the butler's assistance. Jennings, tall and gaunt, with a face carved of granite, bowed gravely. "Her ladyship retired at 10:30, sir. I brought her the usual tisane, as requested." "Chamomile, sir. Prepare by you?" Poirot asked. "Indeed, sir. I have done so these 15 years. Poirot's mustache bristled. "Then it was in your care that the last drink of Lady Eleanor passed. Tell me, did you notice aught unusual in her manner?" Jennings paused. "She seemed pensive, sir. Spoke little. Merely wished me a good night." Poirot inclined his head, but in his eyes shone suspicion. For he knew, poisoners often slip their hand in silence. From servant to solicitor, Poirot moved next. Mr. Pemberton's office was cluttered with papers, deeds, and ledgers. Poirot's little hands leafed through them with remarkable speed. He noted the codicil to Eleanor's will, signed but scarcely a fortnight past. "Always the money," Hastings would say. Poirot murmured, though Hastings was far away. "And yet, it is true. The money, the inheritance, the jewel. They are like the magnet, drawing all to the crime." He questioned Pemberton. "Tell me, monsieur, who pressed for this change of will? Did Lady Eleanor act from her own volition?" Pemberton dabbed at his brow. "She summoned me herself, spoke with clarity, said she wished to honor Miss Armitage, who had been her sole comfort. She was adamant." Poirot studied him. "And you, monsieur? Did you approve?" The solicitor shifted uneasily. My duty was to serve her wishes, of course. But, I confess, I felt the family might protest." His eyes flickered nervously toward Sir Clive, who lingered near the door. Sir Clive, affronted, thumped his cane. "Protest? I should think so. A companion inheriting half the estate, while the family blood is left with scraps. It is unnatural." Poirot's gaze swept over him. "And yet, Sir Clive, unnatural things often conceal the truth. Tell me, were you at the hour Lady Eleanor died?" Clive stiffened. "In my chambers. The storm kept me awake. I read until near 2 o'clock. The valet will confirm it." "Ah," Poirot said softly. "A reading alibi. Convenient, but not impossible." From Clive, Poirot turned to Charles Denham. The young man lounged in an armchair, cigarette smoke curling about him. His smile was insolent. "Do you suspect me, Monsieur Poirot?" "How flattering." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "I suspect everyone, monsieur, even the most charming of nephews." "Where were you last night?" "At cards," Charles replied easily, "with Vivian and the housekeeper as witness. We played whist until 11:30. After that, I retired." Poirot noted the precision, then shifted his gaze to Vivian Armitage. Her face was pale, lips pressed tight. And you, mademoiselle? The cards, yes. But afterward? I went directly to bed, she said, voice low. I was restless. I read for time. Lady Eleanor had seemed tired earlier. I could not sleep. Poirot regarded her in silence, his head cocked. Something trembled beneath her words, fear or perhaps guilt. The day passed with Poirot walking the corridors, peering into cabinets, questioning servants. He found in the kitchen cupboard a small vial, unlabeled, half empty. Jennings swore it was rat poison. Poirot did not contradict, but he placed it carefully into his pocket. He examined the great emerald pendant itself, holding it to the light, tracing the tiny imperfections within its depths. A jewel that brings fortune, but perhaps also death, he murmured. That evening, he sat once more in the drawing room, his notes arrayed upon the table. The heirs gathered, tense and silent, each cloaked in shadow. Poirot lifted his eyes, and they gleamed with certainty. Mess Amos, he said, voice calm yet resonant. I have looked, I have listened, I have questioned, and now the picture becomes clearer. The emerald may be the jewel that dazzles the eyes, but is the truth, the truth that dazzles the little gray cells. Soon, very soon, I shall show you the murderer hiding in plain sight. The clock struck midnight. A log collapsed in the grate with a hiss of sparks. Outside, the mist thickened. Inside, hearts quickened, for Poirot's revelation was near. Chapter 5. The Emerald Confession. The great drawing room of the Emerald Grange had been transformed into a theater of judgment. Heavy drapes shut out the misty night beyond. The fire glowed low in the hearth, casting long shadows across the assembled faces. At the center of it all, upon the Persian rug, stood Hercule Poirot, his small frame immaculate in its dark suit, his mustaches gleaming like a pair of golden scimitars. His eyes sparkled with triumph, for the stage was set for the grand denouement. My friends, he began, his voice calm yet charged with purpose, you are gathered here not for mourning alone, but for revelation. A crime has been committed. Lady Eleanor Harrow, known as the Emerald Widow, did not pass gently into the night. Non. She was sent there by the hand of another. A collective gasp rose, though some faces betrayed less shock than others. Poirot raised a finger. I shall show you, as always, with the order and the logic, how the little gray cells lead to the truth. He began to pace, each step deliberate. Lady Eleanor was in robust health. No illness, no weakness. Yet she dies, and upon her bedside glass we find the trace of a substance most curious. White, crystalline, bitter. Not the chamomile tisane alone, no, but something added. Poison. He stopped before Jennings, the butler, who stiffened under Poirot's gaze. Jennings, you prepare the tisane. You serve it faithfully, as you have for many years. But no, it was not you who poisoned it, for the poison was not within the tisane. It was upon the rim of the glass. Thus, someone entered after you, when Lady Eleanor was alone. Jennings bowed his head slightly. Indeed, sir, I left her chamber before 10. Poirot turned, mustaches quivering with satisfaction. And so, we looked to those who had access. The family, the heirs. He fixed his gaze upon Sir Clive. You, Sir Clive, had reason enough. You despised your sister-in-law's independence. You loathed her intention to gift the emerald to the nation, depriving the Harrows of their jewel. Your alibi is but a solitary one, a book, a candle, a valet. Not impossible. But no, it was not you. Poirot turned sharply to Charles Denham, who smirked as though playing along with some parlor game. And you, Monsieur Charles, the charming nephew. You were desperate for money, your debts at the card table, your creditors circling. And yet, you were not without a witness. At 11:30, you were seen retiring. The opportunity was narrow indeed. And though temptation was strong, it was not you. Charles exhaled smoke in a thin stream, his smirk faltering for the first time. Poirot's gaze softened as he faced Vivian Armitage. She sat rigid, her hands clasped in her lap, her face pale as ivory. And you, mademoiselle. Ah, here lies the tragedy. Lady Eleanor loved you as her own. To you she gave her trust, her affection, her fortune. But in such bonds, there is also jealousy. N'est-ce pas? She loved her memories more than you, perhaps. The emerald, she willed it not to you, but to the museum, to a cold glass case, to strangers who would never know her. That betrayal you could not forgive. Vivian's lips trembled. Poirot raised his hand. You alone were close enough. You played cards until 11:30, then you retired. But not to sleep. No, you returned to Lady Eleanor's chamber. You spoke softly, you soothed her. Perhaps you wept. And when she drank from her glass, the poison you had placed upon its rim took hold. Vivian's eyes darted wildly about the room. It is a lie, she cried. But Poirot's gaze did not waver. He lifted from his pocket the vial found in the kitchen. Rat poison, found where you thought none would look. A pinch, a dust, sufficient to end a life. And in your room, hidden beneath the lining of a drawer, a cloth stained faintly with the same dust. Jennings discovered it this morning under my instruction. Vivian rose suddenly, her chair clattering back. She was going to cast me aside. She spoke of leaving the Grange, of retiring abroad, of placing the pendant beyond us all. After all I had given her, all my years, what was I to be left with? Nothing. Nothing but her memories and the scorn of her family. Her voice cracked, and the confession poured out like floodwaters. The room was still but for the ragged sound of her breathing. Poirot, with infinite sadness, inclined his head. Mademoiselle, love that turns to desperation. Ah, it is the oldest motive of all. But you see, the truth, it will always rise, like oil upon water. Lady Eleanor gave you her affection, but she could not give you the jewel of her heart, and so you took both from her. The silence was broken only by the faint ticking of the mantel clock. Sir Clive muttered a prayer. Charles lit another cigarette with a trembling hand. Vivian sank into her chair, her face buried in her hands. Poirot stood erect, the solemn arbiter of justice. It is done. Lady Eleanor may rest, for the hand of her murderer is revealed. And though the emerald will pass to the museum, let us remember her not for the jewel she possessed, but for the heart that was betrayed. He paused, his eyes sweeping the company. Thus, yes, Amos, the case of the Emerald Widow is concluded. The fire crackled, a log collapsing into embers, as though to seal the words. Poirot drew himself up, mustaches glinting in the firelight, and as if addressing not only the heirs but the unseen audience beyond, he added with a gentle bow, My friends, if this tale of betrayal, of poison, and of the little gray cells has brought you satisfaction, then I beg only this, like subscribe and share, that others too may enjoy the labors of Hercule Poirot. Until next time, au revoir. The flames dimmed. The emerald upon the mantel glimmered faintly, as though it too held secrets never to be spoken. And so concludes The Emerald Widow, another case unraveled by the incomparable Hercule Poirot and his little gray cells. But the mysteries never end. M.S. Amos. If you enjoyed this tale of deception, betrayal, and justice, do not forget to show your support. Like this video, share it with fellow lovers of mystery, and subscribe to the channel so you may join Poirot again on his next great adventure. Until then, keep your wits sharp and beware. The truth often hides in the most unexpected of places.